The rain fell like shattered glass, each drop a tiny dagger against my skin as I hurried across the parking lot. My thin cotton dress clung to my body, already soaked through despite my desperate sprint from the bus stop. October in Chicago was unforgiving, and tonight the wind howled between skyscrapers, funneling the storm into vicious channels that seemed to target me specifically. I should have checked the forecast. I should have brought a jacket. I should have done a lot of things differently in my life. But tonight's poor planning was just the latest in a string of bad decisions that had led me here. 26, single, working the late shift at Bellini's, an upscale Italian restaurant where the tips were good, but the clientele made me feel invisible. The restaurant's back entrance was still 30 yards away, and I was already shivering, my body vibrating with cold as water dripped from my hair down my spine. The employee entrance was deliberately hidden from the main parking area. Heaven forbid patrons see the help arriving, which meant no shelter until I reached it. "Take it." The voice came from nowhere, deep and commanding. I nearly slipped on the wet asphalt as I turned, startled by its proximity. A black Bentley had pulled up beside me, its engine purring with understated power. The back window was down just enough to reveal the outline of a man's face, shadowed against the interior's dark leather. I couldn't make out his features, only the sharp line of his jaw and the glint of what might have been a watch or a cufflink catching the parking lot's dim light. "Excuse me?" I hugged my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how the wet dress must look, clinging to every curve. The cold made me painfully aware of my body's response, and I fought the urge to cross my arms over my chest. The jacket. Something dark and heavy was extended through the window. "Take it. You're drenched." I hesitated. My mother's warnings about strangers played in my head, but they competed with the violent shivering that threatened to crack my ribs. I'm not asking." There was no menace in his tone, just absolute certainty that he would be obeyed. The rain intensified, and a gust of wind nearly knocked me sideways. Self-preservation won out. I reached for the jacket, my fingers brushing against his as I took it. Even that momentary contact sent an electric jolt up my arm. His skin was warm, almost burning against my frozen fingers. "Thank you," I stammered, quickly wrapping the jacket around my shoulders. It was impossibly heavy, made of butter-soft leather that smelled of cedar, expensive cologne, and something distinctly masculine. The weight of it settled around me like armor, and the residual warmth from its owner began to seep into my frozen limbs. "Which restaurant?" The question was clipped, efficient. "Bellini's," I answered automatically, then immediately regretted giving any information to a stranger. The window rolled up without another word, the Bentley gliding away into the night, tires slicing silently through puddles that would have soaked me further. I stood there for a moment, engulfed in a jacket that hung past my thighs. It must have cost more than 3 months of my rent. As I pushed back the sleeves to free my hands, I noticed a small monogram on the cuff. ADM, embroidered in dark thread that nearly matched the black leather. The jacket was a shield against the elements as I finally made my way to the employee entrance. Inside, the kitchen's heat hit me like a wall, the chaotic symphony of pots clanging and chefs shouting a familiar comfort after the storm's wild percussion. "Jesus, Ellie, you look like a drowned cat." Marco, the sous chef, barely glanced up from the sauce he was reducing. "And where'd you get the fancy jacket? Rob a mobster?" I laughed, not knowing those careless words would prove prophetic. "Some guy in a Bentley took pity on me in the parking lot." I shrugged off the jacket, reluctantly parting with its warmth and weight. "I'll have to figure out how to return it." A guy in a Bentley? Sophia, my fellow server, appeared beside me, her perfectly made-up eyes widening. Was it him? Him who? I hung the jacket carefully on a hook in the staff room, taking one last inhale of its scent. Sophia lowered her voice. "Domenico Moretti was supposed to be coming in tonight. Private dining room." I rolled my eyes. Sophia was obsessed with the local gossip about Chicago's wealthy elite, especially those rumored to have connections to less-than-legal enterprises. "I'm sure lots of rich men drive Bentleys, Soph. Not with a security detail of 4 other cars, they don't." She raised an eyebrow. "And not with a reputation that makes the manager practically wet himself arranging everything perfectly." Before I could respond, Luis, the floor manager, clapped his hands for attention. "Listen up. The Adagio room has been reserved for Mr. Moretti and his party. Emily and Jackson, You'll be handling them exclusively. My stomach dropped. Emily. That was me. I'd been hoping for a quiet Wednesday night of regular tables and familiar faces. Mr. Moretti values his privacy, Luis continued, his usual brusque manner replaced with an almost nervous deference. No unnecessary conversation, no lingering, and absolutely no mistakes. Is that clear? The briefing continued, but my attention had drifted back to the jacket hanging innocently on the hook. ADM. A coincidence, surely. There must be thousands of men with those initials. 30 minutes later, I was straightening my uniform and checking my appearance one last time before entering the Adagio room. The private dining space was Bellini's crown jewel, a secluded area with its own entrance from the side of the restaurant, allowing high-profile guests to come and go without passing through the main dining room. I had just finished arranging the last water glass when the door opened. 4 men entered first, their eyes scanning the room with practiced efficiency. They were all dressed impeccably in dark suits, but something about their watchful posture made it clear they weren't here for the renowned Osso Bucco. And then he entered. The air seemed to electrify, molecules rearranging themselves to accommodate his presence. He was tall, his physical power evident even beneath the perfect cut of his charcoal suit. Dark hair swept back from a face that belonged on ancient Roman currency. All sharp angles and commanding presence, with eyes the color of aged whiskey set beneath heavy brows. A neatly trimmed beard accentuated the severe line of his jaw. Those amber eyes swept the room and landed on me. There was a flicker of something, recognition, perhaps, before his gaze moved on, dismissing me as part of the furniture. I exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath. This was Alessandro Domenico Moretti. Even I, with my deliberate avoidance of local gossip, knew the name. Head of the Moretti family, with business interests ranging from legitimate real estate holdings to, well, the rumors varied, but none of them involved charitable work. And I had his jacket. I somehow made it through the initial service, pouring wine with hands that only trembled slightly, reciting specials in a voice that sounded foreign to my own ears. Moretti barely acknowledged me, deep in conversation with his associates, something about a shipment and adjusted schedules. It wasn't until I was clearing the appetizer plates that disaster struck. As I reached across to take Moretti's plate, my sleeve caught on his water glass. Time slowed as I watched it tip, the crystal catching the light before sending its contents directly into Alessandro Moretti's lap. The conversation stopped. The room went silent, except for the drip of water from the table's edge to the carpet. I'm so sorry, I stammered, frantically grabbing napkins. Don't. His voice was exactly as I remembered from the car, deep and commanding. Up close I could see his eyes weren't simply brown, but layered with gold and amber, like looking into the depths of something ancient and dangerous. He stood, water darkening the front of trousers that probably cost more than my monthly salary. One of his men immediately stepped forward with a fresh napkin, which Moretti took with a subtle nod. "Accidents happen," he said, though the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. His gaze fixed on me, and for the first time, he really looked at me. Recognition dawned in those predatory eyes, though some might call it fate. I didn't understand his meaning, but I felt the weight of it nonetheless. The other men at the table watched our exchange with expressions ranging from curiosity to amusement. "Perhaps you could show me to somewhere I might dry off," he suggested, though it wasn't really a suggestion. Luis materialized beside me, profuse apologies spilling from his lips. "Mr. Moretti, please allow me to—" "I'd prefer she show me," Moretti interrupted, his eyes never leaving mine. "We have a previous connection." The way he said connection sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with my still damp hair. Luis looked between us, confusion evident on his face, but he knew better than to argue. "Of course. Emily will show you to the executive office. It has a private bathroom." Moretti gestured for me to lead the way. As I turned, I felt his presence behind me, the heat of him like a physical touch between my shoulder blades. One of his men moved to follow, but Moretti stopped him with a small hand motion. The short walk down the hallway felt like crossing an ocean. I was acutely aware of every step, every breath. When we reached the office, I opened the door and stepped aside. "The bathroom is through that door," I said, pointing to the right. "There should be fresh towels." Moretti didn't move toward the bathroom. Instead, he closed the office door behind him and leaned against it, effectively blocking my exit. "Your name is Emily." It wasn't a question. "Yes." "And you have something that belongs to me?" My heart stumbled in my chest. "Your jacket. I didn't know." "Where is it?" "In the staff room. I can get it for you after your dinner." He studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You took something of mine. I want something of yours in return." Fear coiled in my stomach. "I don't understand." A smile curved his lips, transforming his severe features into something almost beautiful. Almost. "Your full name," he said. "Give me your full name, Emily." It seemed a small thing to give, but something in me hesitated, as if my name in his mouth would give him power over me. "Emily Carson," I said finally. "Emily Carson," he repeated, as if tasting the syllables. "You borrowed my jacket without knowing who I was or what it might cost you. That shows either remarkable courage or remarkable foolishness." "It was just raining," I said, my voice smaller than I intended. "And you offered." "I did." He pushed himself off the door and took a step toward me. "And now I'm curious about what else you might accept from me." The implication hung in the air between us. I should have been offended. I should have been frightened. Instead, I felt a dangerous thrill race through my veins. "I should get back to the dining room," I managed to say. "Yes," he agreed, though he made no move to let me pass. "But we're not finished, you and I. Not by a long shot." He reached past me to open the bathroom door, his arm brushing mine in a touch that seemed deliberate. "I'll return shortly. And Emily?" The way he said my name made it sound like a secret between us. "Don't even think about running. I'd find you." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And as I slipped back to the dining room, my heart hammering against my ribs, I realized with a sinking certainty that Alessandro Domenico Moretti was a man who kept his promises. The rest of the dinner service passed in a blur of crystal and silver, my hands operating on autopilot while my mind raced with the implications of my encounter with Moretti. He returned to the dining room minutes after our conversation, his trousers mysteriously dry, his composure unruffled. If his associates noticed anything amiss, they gave no indication. I felt his eyes on me throughout the evening, tracking my movements as I served each course. Not staring, he was too sophisticated for that, but aware of me in a way that made my skin prickle with nervous energy. Occasionally our eyes would meet, and he would hold my gaze for a heartbeat too long before turning back to his conversation. By the time they requested the check, I was a mess of frayed nerves and confused emotions. I presented the leather folder with shaking hands, careful to place it directly in front of Moretti, rather than risk another accident. "Everything was exceptional," he said, his voice pitched low enough that only I could hear. His fingers brushed mine as he took the folder, the contact brief, but deliberate. "Almost worth the ruined trousers." I mumbled something that might have been, "Thank you," or "I'm sorry," or perhaps an incoherent mixture of both. He slid a black credit card into the folder without even glancing at the total. A sum that would have covered my rent for 2 months. When I returned with the receipt, he signed it with a heavy silver pen pulled from his inner pocket. As he handed the folder back to me, I noticed he'd written something beneath his signature. A phone number, followed by 2 words. "Call me." Heat rushed to my face. I quickly closed the folder, but not before one of his associates, a lean, hawk-faced man with calculating eyes, noticed the exchange and smirked. Moretti stood, buttoning his suit jacket with an elegant flick of his wrists. "The jacket," he reminded me, his tone making it clear this was not a request that could be denied. "Of course, I'll get it right away." I retreated to the staff room, my heart hammering against my ribs. The leather jacket hung where I'd left it, seeming to absorb all the light in the room. I ran my fingers over the supple material one last time before draping it over my arm and returning to the private dining room. The party was preparing to leave, Moretti's security detail already moving toward the private exit. Moretti himself stood slightly apart, speaking in hushed tones to the hawk-faced man, who nodded with military precision before joining the others. I approached cautiously, holding out the jacket. Thank you again for lending it to me. Moretti took the jacket, his fingers deliberately grazing mine in the process. It suited you, he said, his eyes traveling over me in a slow, deliberate assessment. Though perhaps something in burgundy would better complement your coloring. Before I could formulate a response, he slipped a folded bill into my palm, closing my fingers around it with his own. For the excellent service, his touch lingered, warm and firm around my closed fist, his thumb brushing almost imperceptibly against my wrist where my pulse betrayed my racing heart. Your jacket saved me tonight, I said, finding my voice at last. I appreciate the kindness. Something flickered in his eyes, amusement, perhaps, or surprise. Kindness is not a quality often attributed to me, Emily Carson. He released my hand and shrugged into his jacket, the movement fluid and graceful. It settled on his broad shoulders as if it had been molded specifically for his form, which I realized it probably had been. The number, he said, nodding toward the check folder I still clutched in my other hand. Use it. With that, he turned and followed his men toward the exit, leaving me standing alone in the empty dining room, a folded bill in my palm, and the ghost of his touch still warm on my skin. It wasn't until he was gone that I uncurled my fingers to find not the expected 20 or 50, but a crisp $1,000 bill. My breath caught. I'd never even seen currency in this denomination before, had thought they'd stopped printing them decades ago. The message was clear. Alessandro Moretti operated by different rules than the rest of the world. I shoved the bill deep into my pocket, suddenly afraid someone might see it and ask questions I couldn't answer. The night eventually ended, the restaurant emptied of its last patrons. I changed out of my uniform in the staff bathroom, examining my reflection in the harsh fluorescent light. Same brown hair falling in messy waves to my shoulders, same green eyes, perhaps a bit wider tonight, with the same dark smudges of fatigue beneath them. Same Emily Carson who took the bus home to a tiny apartment and ate ramen noodles when tips were lean. Yet something had shifted. The woman who had borrowed a stranger's jacket in the rain no longer existed. In her place stood someone who had caught the attention of a man like Alessandro Moretti, a man whose very name was whispered with a mixture of fear and reverence. I fished the check folder from my bag and stared at the number scrawled beneath his bold signature. 10 digits that represented a choice. I could throw it away, return to my ordinary life, and pretend this night had never happened. Or I could call and step willingly into whatever dangerous game Moretti was playing. The smart choice was obvious. I tucked the folder back into my bag, the decision postponed but not forgotten. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the city streets gleaming under the streetlights. I pulled my thin jacket tighter around me, missing the weight and warmth of the leather that had protected me earlier. The bus stop was 3 blocks away, and I hurried through the deserted streets, always conscious of the vulnerability of being a woman alone at night in the city. I was so focused on reaching the bus stop that I didn't notice the black Bentley until it pulled alongside me, moving at a walking pace, the back window lowered, revealing Moretti's unmistakable profile. "It's nearly 2 a.m, he stated, as if this observation alone should explain his presence. "Get in." I stopped walking but didn't move toward the car. "I'm fine, thank you. The bus will be here soon." His laugh was low and without humor. "There are no more buses tonight. The last one left 20 minutes ago." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. "How would you know that?" "I make it my business to know things, Emily." He pushed open the car door, particularly about people who interest me. The implications of his statement, that he had looked into me, had perhaps been watching me, should have terrified me. Instead, I felt a perverse thrill at the idea that someone like him would find me worth his attention. Still, I hesitated. "I don't even know you, Alessandro Domenico Moretti," he said, as if formally introducing himself for the first time. "And you're freezing, stubborn, and in need of a ride home. The choice is yours, but I won't offer a third time." I glanced down the empty street. Even if he was lying about the buses, the prospect of waiting alone at the stop for who knew how long suddenly seemed less appealing than accepting his offer. "Just a ride home," I clarified, taking a step toward the car. His smile held no warmth. "Just a ride." I slid into the back seat beside him, immediately engulfed by the scent of leather and his cologne. The interior was illuminated only by the soft blue glow of instrument lights from the front, casting Moretti's features into sharp relief. He looked even more dangerous in this half-light, like a predator comfortable in the darkness. The driver, separated from us by a privacy partition, pulled smoothly away from the curb without being given any direction. "You know where I live?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Of course." Moretti sat with casual confidence, one arm stretched along the back of the seat, not quite touching me, but close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "The Westmont Apartments on Lakeshore Drive. Unit 7018. Rent-controlled building with questionable security and a superintendent who drinks away half his paycheck at O'Malley's pub every Friday." My mouth went dry. "Why would you? How did you?" As I said, I make it my business to know things. His eyes gleamed in the darkness. "Especially when someone takes something of mine." "You gave me the jacket," I reminded him, finding a spark of defiance despite the unsettling demonstration of how much he knew about me. "So, I did." His hand moved from the seat back to brush a strand of hair from my face, the touch so light I might have imagined it. "But that doesn't explain why you accepted it. Most women wouldn't take clothing from a stranger, no matter how bad the weather." I swallowed hard. I was desperate, and you weren't exactly taking no for an answer. "True." His fingers lingered near my cheek. "I rarely do." The car turned onto Lakeshore Drive, the lake of vast darkness beyond the windows. We'd reach my apartment in minutes. I should have been relieved, but instead felt a strange disappointment that our time together was ending so soon. "Why did you come looking for me tonight?" I asked. "You had your jacket back. We were even." Moretti studied me for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. "Let's just say I'm a man who recognizes value when he sees it, whether in business or other areas of life. And what value do you see in me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. His hand moved to cup my chin, gently but firmly turning my face toward his. In the dim light, his eyes burned like embers. "That's what I intend to discover." The car slowed to a stop in front of my building, but Moretti made no move to release me. His gaze dropped to my lips, and for one breathless moment, I thought he might kiss me. Instead, he drew back, his hand falling away. "Friday night, 8 o'clock. I'll send a car." Again, not a question or invitation, but a statement of fact. "I might be working," I said weakly. His smile was knowing. "You're not scheduled for Friday. Luis has already adjusted the rota." The realization that he had this kind of influence, that he could rearrange my work schedule with a word, should have alarmed me. Instead, it sent a forbidden thrill down my spine. "Why me?" I whispered. "I'm nobody." "Nobody?" His eyebrow arched. "A woman who borrows a stranger's $1,000 jacket in a storm, spills water on one of the most feared men in Chicago, and then stands her ground when questioned. That's not nobody, Emily Carson. That's someone worth knowing better." Before I could respond, he reached past me and opened my door, the gesture both courteous and a clear dismissal. "Friday. Wear something you don't mind being seen in." I stepped out of the car on unsteady legs, my mind reeling. As soon as I closed the door, the Bentley pulled away, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with more questions than answers. The elevator in my building was out of service again, forcing me to climb 7 flights of stairs to reach my apartment. By the time I unlocked my door, I was physically exhausted but mentally wide awake, replaying every moment of my encounters with Alessandro Moretti. My apartment was small but clean, decorated with secondhand furniture and salvaged artwork that gave it a cozy, bohemian feel at odds with my current state of mind. I dropped my bag on the counter and headed straight for the shower, desperate to wash away the lingering scent of expensive cologne and the phantom touch of Moretti's fingers on my skin. As hot water cascaded over me, I tried to make sense of the night's events. A man like Alessandro Moretti didn't pursue waitresses from modest backgrounds without an agenda. What could he possibly want from me? The obvious answer made my cheeks burn despite the steam filling the bathroom. Men like him took what they wanted and discarded what no longer amused them. I would be a temporary diversion at best, a cautionary tale at worst. And yet, I stepped out of the shower and wrapped myself in a threadbare towel, padding to the kitchen for a glass of water. My gaze fell on my bag, where the check folder with Moretti's number still waited. Before I could overthink it, I dug it out and entered the number into my phone, saving it under simply ADM. I didn't call or text. Just having the number felt like a talisman, a connection to the surreal events of the night. As I crawled into bed, the first gray light of dawn was already seeping around the edges of my blinds. Despite my exhaustion, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Moretti's face, felt his hand on mine, heard his voice issuing not an invitation but a command. Friday, 8 o'clock. I had 3 days to decide whether to step willingly into whatever web Alessandro Domenico Moretti was spinning around me, or to run as far and as fast as I could in the opposite direction. But even as I considered my options, I knew the decision had already been made the moment I accepted his jacket in the rain. Friday arrived with the inevitability of the tide. I spent the intervening days in a state of nervous anticipation, jumping every time my phone chimed, though he never called or texted. Twice I almost canceled, my finger hovering over his number before I lost my nerve. What would I even say? Sorry, I've reconsidered being swept up in whatever dangerous game you're playing. I told no one about my upcoming date, meeting. I wasn't sure what to call it. Sophia noticed my distraction during our shared shift on Thursday and pressed me for details, but I deflected with vague mentions of family stress. The truth would have launched a barrage of questions I wasn't prepared to answer, even to myself. By 7 o'clock Friday evening, my small apartment looked like a clothing bomb had detonated. Every dress I owned lay discarded across my bed and chair, none of them suitable for whatever the night might hold. Moretti's parting words echoed in my mind. Wear something you don't mind being seen in. The implication being, we would be somewhere public, somewhere people might recognize him. And, by extension, me. I finally settled on a deep emerald dress I'd bought for a cousin's wedding 2 years ago. The color brought out my eyes, and the cut was modest enough to be respectable, but fitted enough to suggest the curves beneath. It was the most expensive piece of clothing I owned, though I suspected it wouldn't even register as acceptable in Moretti's world. At precisely 7:45, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. Car waiting downstairs. My stomach clenched. This was my last chance to back out, to pretend none of this had happened. I could ignore the text, turn off my phone, and spend the evening with a glass of wine and a book, safely anonymous. Instead, I grabbed my only decent coat, a black wool peacoat that had seen better days, and a small clutch purse, checked my reflection one last time, and headed downstairs. The car waiting at the curb wasn't the Bentley, but a sleek black Audi, its engine purring softly in the evening chill. A driver in a dark suit stood beside the rear passenger door, his posture military straight. He nodded respectfully as I approached. "Miss Carson," he said, opening the door. Not a question. He knew exactly who I was. I slid into the back seat, half expecting to find Moretti waiting. But the car was empty. The interior smelled of new leather and subtle air freshener, the seats comfortable but not as luxurious as the Bentleys had been. As we pulled away from my building, I realized I had no idea where we were going. "Excuse me," I called to the driver. "Could you tell me our destination?" His eyes met mine briefly in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Moretti's residence, Miss Carson." My pulse quickened. Not a restaurant or public venue, but his home. The implications sent a flutter of both excitement and apprehension through my stomach. We headed north along the lakeshore, eventually turning onto a private drive guarded by an imposing gate. The driver pressed a button, and the gate swung open silently, admitting us to a winding driveway flanked by perfectly manicured landscaping illuminated by subtle ground lighting. The house that emerged at the end of the drive wasn't what I had expected. Rather than some ostentatious mansion, it was a modernist structure of glass, steel, and warm wood, perched on the lakeshore like a ship about to set sail. Architecturally stunning but somehow restrained, elegant without being showy. The driver came around to open my door. "Mr. Moretti is waiting inside. Vito will show you in." As if on cue, the front door opened, and a solidly built man in a dark suit appeared. His face was impassive as he watched me approach, his eyes making a quick professional assessment before he stepped aside to allow me entry. "Miss Carson," he said with a slight nod. "This way, please." The interior of the house was even more impressive than its exterior. Soaring ceilings, walls of glass that offered panoramic views of the lake, and a carefully curated collection of what I assumed was museum-quality art. The furniture was minimal but obviously expensive, every piece chosen with deliberate care. Vito led me through the main living area to a set of steps that descended to a lower level. Here, the wall of windows continued, but the space was more intimate. A sunken seating area facing a fireplace where flames danced merrily, casting warm light over the room. Alessandro Moretti stood with his back to me, facing the darkened lake beyond the glass. He held a crystal tumbler of amber liquid, the firelight catching its edges as he swirled it gently. He must have heard our approach, but he didn't turn immediately, allowing me a moment to take in the breadth of his shoulders beneath a charcoal cashmere sweater paired with impeccably tailored dark trousers. "Thank you, Vito," he said finally, his voice carrying the same commanding presence it had the first time I heard it in the rain. "That will be all." Vito retreated silently, leaving me alone with Moretti. Only then did he turn to face me, his amber eyes reflecting the firelight as they swept over me in a slow, deliberate assessment. "Emily," he said, my name somehow transformed in his mouth to something precious and rare. "You came." "You didn't give me much choice," I replied, finding a thread of defiance despite the nervousness fluttering in my chest. "You rearranged my work schedule." A smile touched his lips, not reaching his eyes. "I removed obstacles. The choice was still yours." He gestured to the seating area. "Please, sit. Would you like a drink?" I perched on the edge of one of the low couches, hyper-aware of his gaze still on me. "Just water, thank you." He raised an eyebrow, but moved to a side table where a crystal decanter and glasses waited. "You don't drink alcohol?" "Not when I'm—" I trailed off, unsure how to finish that sentence. "Nervous?" he supplied, bringing me a glass of water with a single perfect ice cube. "Or is it that you don't trust me?" Our fingers brushed as I accepted the glass, and I fought to suppress a shiver at the contact. "Both, I think." Instead of being offended, he laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his severe features and made him appear almost approachable. Honesty. Refreshing. He took a seat across from me, close enough that I could smell the subtle notes of his cologne, but far enough to maintain a respectable distance. Most people lie to me out of fear, or because they want something. "What could I possibly want from you?" I asked. His eyes gleamed with amusement. "Money, power, protection, sex. The list is generally predictable." Heat rushed to my cheeks at his bluntness. "I don't want any of those things." "No?" He leaned forward slightly, studying me with unnerving intensity. "Then what do you want, Emily Carson?" The question caught me off guard. What did I want? From life? From him? I don't know, I admitted. I'm still trying to figure that out. He nodded, as if my answer satisfied something in him. "Fair enough." He took a sip of his drink. "You're probably wondering why you're here." The thought had crossed my mind. "You intrigued me," he said simply. "That doesn't happen often." I twisted the glass in my hands, watching the ice cube circle. "Because I borrowed your jacket? Or because I spilled water on you? Because you weren't afraid of me?" His gaze was penetrating, seeing too much. "Everyone is afraid of me, Emily. It's what keeps me alive." There was something so matter-of-fact in his statement. Not boastful, but simply acknowledging a truth about his existence. For the first time, I glimpsed the reality of who Alessandro Moretti was. Not just a powerful, wealthy man, but one who lived in a world where fear was currency and trust a luxury he couldn't afford. "Maybe I should be afraid of you," I said quietly. He didn't deny it. "Maybe. But you're not, are you?" "Not really." He set his glass down and leaned back, regarding me thoughtfully. "Tell me about yourself. Not the details I already know. Tell me what makes Emily Carson tick." I took a sip of water, playing for time. There's not much to tell. I grew up in Michigan, moved to Chicago for college on scholarship, dropped out in my 3rd year when my mom got sick and needed care. After she died, I just stayed. Started waitressing to pay the bills. Kept meaning to go back to school but never quite managed it. "What were you studying?" he asked, seeming genuinely interested. "Art history, with a minor in restoration. I wanted to work in a museum someday, preserving beautiful things." His eyes flickered to a painting on the wall. A small, luminous piece that even my untrained eye could tell was valuable. "And now?" I shrugged, suddenly conscious of how mundane my life must seem to someone like him. Now I serve overpriced pasta to people who don't see me and try to make rent each month. Not exactly the dream, but it's a living. Dreams can be reclaimed, Emily. There was something in his tone, not pity, which I would have hated, but a kind of understanding that surprised me. Sometimes they just take a different path than we expected. Is that what happened to you? I dared to ask. Did your path change? A shadow crossed his features. My path was determined before I was born. The only choice was whether to embrace it or fight it, and you embraced it. I survived it, he corrected. There's a difference. We lapsed into silence, the crackling fire and distant sound of waves against the shore, the only sounds in the room. Despite the luxury surrounding us, there was a strange intimacy to the moment, as if we were just two people sharing confidences rather than a notorious crime boss and a waitress who had stumbled into his orbit by chance. Are you hungry? He asked finally, breaking the silence. I realized I hadn't eaten since lunch, too nervous about the evening ahead to manage more than coffee. Yes, actually. Good. I took the liberty of arranging dinner. He stood in one fluid motion, extending his hand to help me up, this way. His hand was warm and solid around mine, the contact sending an unexpected jolt of awareness up my arm. He led me through the house to a smaller room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a terrace and the lake beyond. A table had been set for two, elegant in its simplicity, fine china, crystal, and silver, arrayed on crisp white linen. You knew I'd come, I observed as he pulled out my chair. He smiled, the expression transforming his severe features. I hoped. As he took his seat across from me, the door opened, and a man in chef's whites appeared carrying 2 plates. Your appetizers, Mr. Moretti, the scallops with brown butter and sage, as requested. Thank you, Marco. We'll serve ourselves from here. The chef nodded and retreated, leaving us alone again. Moretti poured wine into my glass despite my earlier refusal of alcohol, a ruby-red liquid that caught the light. Just a taste, he encouraged, seeing my hesitation. It's paired specifically with the food. I took a small sip, the wine exploding on my palate with notes of cherry and something darker, earthier. It's good, I admitted, Barolo. From a vineyard my family has owned for generations. He watched me with those intense eyes. Before you ask, yes, that part of my business is entirely legitimate. I hadn't been about to ask, but his preemptive answer raised questions about what parts weren't legitimate. The reminder of who he was, what he was rumored to be, sent a chill down my spine. Why am I really here, Alessandro? I used his first name deliberately, testing the boundaries. He took his time answering, cutting into a scallop with surgical precision. I told you. You interest me. You have women throwing themselves at you. Beautiful women, I'm sure. Women who understand your world. I'm just a waitress who borrowed your jacket. You're selling yourself short, Emily. His gaze was steady. Those women want something from me. Protection, status, money. You look at me and see a person, not a means to an end. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my life? There was a vulnerability in his admission that caught me off guard. Despite his power and wealth, Alessandro Moretti was lonely, surrounded by people who either feared him or wanted to use him. So this is... what? Friendship? I asked, unable to keep the skepticism from my voice. The smile he gave me was dangerous in its sensuality. I think we both know it's more than that. Heat bloomed in my chest and spread upward to my face. Before I could formulate a response, the door opened again, and Marco appeared with our main course. Perfectly seared steaks with a red wine reduction, and roasted vegetables arranged like an artist's palette. The interruption gave me time to collect myself. When we were alone again, I steered the conversation to safer ground, asking about the art in his home, which led to a discussion of various museums and exhibitions. Alessandro was surprisingly knowledgeable about art history, his observations insightful and occasionally provocative. By the time dessert arrived, a delicate panna cotta with fresh berries, I had almost forgotten the circumstances that had brought me here. Almost, but not quite. The awareness of who he was hummed beneath every exchange, a current of danger that made each moment more vivid, more intense. Walk with me, Alessandro suggested, after coffee had been served and cleared. The view of the lake is worth seeing, even at night. He led me through glass doors onto a terrace that stretched the length of the house. The October air was crisp but not uncomfortably cold, the sky clear and scattered with stars. Beyond the terrace, the lake stretched like black glass, reflecting pinpricks of light from distant boats and the moon's silvery path across the water. Alessandro stood close beside me, his warmth a barrier against the chill. Beautiful, isn't it? Yes, I agreed, unable to deny the breathtaking vista before us. I come out here most nights, he said, his voice quiet. It reminds me that there are things in this world that can't be controlled or possessed. The lake, the stars, the night itself. I glanced at him, surprised by the philosophical turn. Is that unusual for you, not being in control? His lips curved in a rueful smile. More than you know. He turned to face me, and suddenly the vast lake and star-filled sky seemed to recede, my awareness narrowing to the minimal space between us. His hand came up to cup my cheek, the touch gentle despite the power I knew those hands possessed. I'm going to kiss you now, Emily, he said, his voice dropping to a register that sent a shiver down my spine. If that's not what you want, tell me now. I should have said no, should have stepped back, thanked him for dinner, and asked to be taken home. Should have recognized the danger of allowing myself to be drawn further into his world. Instead, I leaned into his touch and whispered, yes. His lips met mine with surprising gentleness, a question rather than a demand. But as I responded, the kiss deepened, becoming something hungry and insistent. His arm slid around my waist, drawing me against the solid wall of his chest. I felt surrounded by him, consumed by the heat and scent of him, lost in sensations I hadn't known my body was capable of experiencing. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, his eyes had darkened to the color of honey, desire evident in their depths. Stay the night, he murmured against my lips. Reality crashed back with the force of a wave against the shore. I took a step back, putting space between us. I can't. Something flickered in his eyes, disappointment, frustration, perhaps even respect. Can't or won't. Both, I admitted. This is too fast, too much. I hardly know you. He didn't try to close the distance between us, though I could see the tension in his posture, the restraint it took to honor my decision. And what you do know should probably send you running in the opposite direction. Probably, I agreed, a shaky laugh escaping me. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. I'll have Vito drive you home. Relief and disappointment warred within me as I followed him back inside. I gathered my coat and purse in silence, unsure what to say. This evening had been like a dream, beautiful, surreal, disconnected from my ordinary existence. Returning to my small apartment felt like waking up to cold reality. At the front door, Alessandro took my hand, bringing it to his lips in an old-world gesture that seemed both courtly and intimate. This isn't the end, Emily Carson. Just the beginning. It was a promise and a warning, wrapped in the same velvet voice that had offered me his jacket in the rain. Vito materialized to escort me to the waiting car. As we drove away, I looked back to see Alessandro standing at the door, his powerful silhouette framed against the warm light of his home, watching until the car rounded a bend, and he disappeared from view. The next week passed in a strange limbo. I went through the motions of my normal life, serving tables, paying bills, grocery shopping, but everything felt muted, as if the volume had been turned down on the world. Alessandro hadn't contacted me since our dinner, and I vacillated between relief and disappointment with each silent day. I told myself it was better this way. Whatever had sparked between us was too dangerous to pursue. He lived in a world I could barely comprehend, one where violence wasn't just a possibility but a currency, where power meant the difference between life and death. I was already in too deep. Walking away now was the sensible choice. Yet I found myself checking my phone constantly, jumping whenever it chimed, only to feel a hollow disappointment when it wasn't him. Earth to Emily. Sophia waved her hand in front of my face, snapping me back to the present. We were restocking the bar for the evening shift, and I'd apparently zoned out while counting wine glasses. "That's the third time tonight. What is going on with you?" I forced a smile. "Sorry, just tired." She narrowed her eyes, clearly not buying it. "No, this is different. This is..." Her eyes widened suddenly. "Oh my God, you're seeing someone. That's it, isn't it?" "What? No, I'm not." "You totally are. You've got that distracted, dreamy look." "Who is he? Do I know him?" Before I could formulate a denial, Luis appeared behind us. "Emily, you have a delivery at the front." Grateful for the interruption, I hurried to the restaurant's entrance, expecting a package or perhaps flowers from my aunt, who occasionally sent small gifts to brighten that dreary apartment, as she put it. Instead, I found a courier, holding a large flat box, tied with a simple black ribbon. "Emily Carson?" he confirmed, handing me the package. I nodded, taking the surprisingly heavy box. "Thank you." He gave a short nod and left without waiting for a tip, which struck me as odd. I carried the box to the staff room, aware of Sophia trailing behind me, curiosity practically radiating from her. "Well, open it," she urged as I set the box on the break room table. With a mixture of trepidation and anticipation, I untied the ribbon and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a leather jacket in a rich burgundy color. The leather was butter soft to the touch, clearly expensive, and when I lifted it from the box, I found it was perfectly sized for my frame. "Holy shit," Sophia breathed, reaching out to touch the sleeve. "That's gotta be worth at least $3,000. Who sent you this?" Beneath the jacket was a small cream-colored card with a handwritten message in elegant script. "For the next time you're caught in a storm. ADM." My heart raced as I ran my fingers over the embossed initials, remembering his words from our first meeting in the Bentley. "Though perhaps something in burgundy would better complement your coloring." "ADM?" Sophia read over my shoulder. "Who's that?" I slipped the card into my pocket. "Just someone I met recently. Someone who drops $3,000 on a jacket as a casual gift?" "Emily, what aren't you telling me?" Before I could answer, Luis appeared in the doorway. "Break's over. Table 7 needs attention." Saved by the dinner rush, I carefully returned the jacket to its box and stowed it in my locker, away from prying eyes and questions I couldn't answer. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of orders and plates, though Sophia shot me curious glances whenever our paths crossed. By closing time, I was exhausted but wired, my mind spinning with the implications of Alessandro's gift. As I changed out of my uniform, I debated what to do. The proper response would be to return the jacket. It was too expensive, too intimate a gift to accept from a man I barely knew, especially one like Alessandro. But part of me thrilled at the gesture, at the evidence that he was still thinking of me despite his silence. I pulled out my phone and stared at his number, saved but never used. After several false starts, I typed a simple message. "The jacket is beautiful, but I can't accept it." His response came almost immediately. "Yes, you can. Wear it tomorrow night, 8 p.m. I'll send a car." My pulse quickened. No, please, no question mark. Just the same commanding certainty I'd come to expect from him. I should have been offended by his presumption. But instead, I felt that now familiar thrill of anticipation. Before I could overthink it, I replied, "Where are we going?" 3 dots appeared, then, "Somewhere special. Dress accordingly." I bit my lip, considering my response. This was my chance to end whatever this was before it went any further, to step back from the precipice I found myself approaching. "I'll be ready at 8. The decision made, I slipped my phone back into my bag, collected the jacket box, and headed home, my mind already racing through the limited contents of my closet, trying to imagine what dress accordingly might mean in Alessandro Moretti's world. The following evening found me once again descending the stairs of my apartment building at precisely 7:45, this time wearing the burgundy leather jacket over a simple black dress. The jacket fit as if it had been made specifically for me, which I realized it probably had been. Alessandro didn't strike me as a man who shopped off the rack. The same black Audi waited at the curb, the same driver holding the door open for me with a respectful nod. This time, however, I wasn't alone in the back seat. Alessandro sat watching me as I slid in beside him, his eyes warming with appreciation as they took in the sight of me and the jacket he'd chosen. He was dressed more formally tonight, in a tailored suit of such deep blue it appeared almost black, a crisp white shirt open at the collar revealing the strong column of his throat. "The color suits you," he said by way of greeting, his voice sending a shiver down my spine despite the jacket's warmth. "Thank you," I said, suddenly shy under his intense gaze. "It's beautiful, but you shouldn't have—" "I wanted to," he interrupted, his tone making it clear the matter wasn't up for discussion. "Besides, I had an ulterior motive." I raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" His smile was slow and deliberate. "I wanted to see you in something I'd chosen. Something that would remind you of me whenever you wore it." The possessiveness in his statement should have alarmed me, but instead, it sent a forbidden thrill through my body. "Where are we going tonight?" I asked, changing the subject. "Patience." He reached for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm in a gesture both soothing and intimate. "You'll see soon enough." The car wound through the city, eventually pulling up to a nondescript building in an area I didn't recognize. There was no sign, no indication of what might be inside, only a plain metal door with a small camera mounted above it. "What is this place?" I asked, as Alessandro helped me from the car, something few people get to see. His hand settled at the small of my back, warm and steadying as he guided me to the door. The door opened before we reached it, a stern-faced man in a dark suit, nodding respectfully to Alessandro. "Mr. Moretti, everything is prepared as you requested." "Thank you, Paolo." We stepped into a small anteroom where another suited man waited to take our coats. As I slipped off the burgundy jacket, I caught Alessandro watching me, his eyes darkening with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Beyond the anteroom lay a space that took my breath away. A private gallery of sorts, with soft lighting illuminating what appeared to be museum-quality paintings and sculptures. The room was empty save for us, the silence reverent as in a church. "These are all original," Alessandro said quietly, watching my reaction. "Some on loan from private collectors, others from my personal collection." I moved slowly through the space, my art history training kicking in as I recognized works by masters spanning centuries. A small Caravaggio, an early Kandinsky, a hauntingly beautiful marble sculpture that appeared to be Bernini or one of his students. "How is this possible?" I breathed, stopping before a painting I was certain belonged in the Uffizi. "These should be in museums. Some things," Alessandro said, coming to stand beside me, "are too precious to share with the world. They deserve to be appreciated in privacy by those who truly understand their value." The weight of his words settled over me, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the art. I turned to find him watching me, not the masterpieces surrounding us. "Why show me this?" I asked. "Because you studied art history, because you wanted to preserve beautiful things." His hand came up to brush a strand of hair from my face. "Because I wanted to give you something no amount of money could buy. A private viewing of works most people only see in textbooks, if at all." The thoughtfulness of the gesture struck me deeply. Alessandro had listened when I spoke of my abandoned dreams, had remembered what mattered to me. This wasn't about displays of wealth or power. It was personal in a way I hadn't expected from him. "Thank you," I said simply, unable to find words adequate to express what this meant to me. He nodded, seeming to understand all I couldn't say. "Come. There's more." Alessandro led me deeper into the gallery, past paintings and sculptures that represented centuries of human creativity and genius. In a smaller room at the back, a table had been set for two, an intimate dinner arrangement surrounded by masterpieces. "I thought we might dine here tonight," he said, pulling out my chair. "Art should be enjoyed with all the senses." A waiter appeared as if conjured from thin air, pouring wine and presenting the first course. A delicate composition of flavors that matched the artistic surroundings in its creativity and execution. "How did you arrange all this?" I asked, gesturing to our private museum. These works must be worth more than you can imagine, Alessandro finished for me. Let's just say I have connections in the art world. Collectors who owe me favors. Museum directors who understand the value of discretion. The implications of his statement hung in the air between us. This was a reminder of who he was. A man with the power to make impossible things happen, whose influence extended into worlds I had only dreamed of entering. "Does it bother you?" he asked, watching me carefully. Knowing how I might have acquired this influence? I considered his question, turning the wine glass in my fingers. "I'd be lying if I said no," he nodded, seeming to appreciate my honesty. "Most people in my life lie to me, Emily. They tell me what they think I want to hear. Your honesty is refreshing." "What exactly is it that you do, Alessandro?" I dared to ask directly. Beyond the legitimate businesses, his eyes held mine, evaluating, calculating. For a moment I thought he wouldn't answer. "I protect what's mine," he said finally. "Family interests, territories, traditions. Some call it criminal. I call it necessary. And does that protection involve hurting people?" His expression hardened. Sometimes, but never innocence. Never those who haven't chosen to play the game. I took a sip of wine, letting the rich flavor coat my tongue while I processed his words. And what am I in all this? A diversion? A temporary amusement? "You," he said, reaching across the table to take my hand, "are the first person in a very long time who has made me feel something real." His thumb traced circles on my palm, sending shivers up my arm. "The question is, what am I to you?" The directness of his question caught me off guard. What was Alessandro Moretti to me? A dangerous temptation, an escape from my ordinary life, something more. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but I want to find out." His smile transformed his face, making him look younger, almost boyish in his pleasure. "Good, that's all I ask." We finished our meal surrounded by beauty, discussing the art, our childhoods, books we'd read, carefully avoiding the darker aspects of his life, the reality of who and what he was. It was a beautiful illusion, this evening out of time, and I found myself wishing it could last forever. After dessert, Alessandro suggested we walk through the gallery one more time, as we stopped before a particularly moving sculpture of two lovers entwined. He stood behind me, close enough that I could feel his warmth without quite touching. "What do you see when you look at this piece?" he asked, his voice low near my ear. I studied the marble figures, their bodies curved toward each other in eternal longing. "Desire," I said. "But also pain. They're reaching for each other, but there's something keeping them apart." "Yes," he murmured, "forever separated by a barrier only they can see." His hand settled lightly on my shoulders, turning me to face him. The intensity in his amber eyes made my breath catch. "I don't want barriers between us, Emily," he said, one hand coming up to cup my cheek. "But my world is dangerous. Being with me means accepting that danger." I leaned into his touch, understanding the weight of what he was saying. Is that a warning or an invitation? Both. His thumb brushed across my lower lip. "I want you in my life, but I need you to choose it with open eyes." Instead of answering with words, I rose on tiptoes and pressed my lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, a question, an acceptance. Then, his arms wrapped around me, pulling me against him as the kiss deepened into something hungry and desperate. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his eyes had darkened with desire. "Come home with me tonight," he said, his voice rough. This time I didn't hesitate. Yes. The ride to his lakeside home passed in a blur of heated glances and linked fingers. There was an inevitability to what was happening between us, as if all paths had been leading to this moment since I first accepted his jacket in the rain. At his home, he dismissed the staff with a quiet word, ensuring our privacy. Then he led me through the house to his bedroom, a spacious sanctuary with the same wall of windows overlooking the lake, now a canvas of moonlight and shadow. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, his hands resting lightly on my hips. In answer, I reached for the buttons of his shirt, my fingers trembling slightly as I undid them one by one. He stood perfectly still, letting me set the pace, though I could feel the tension in his body. the restraint it took not to take control. When I pushed the shirt from his shoulders, I couldn't suppress a gasp. His torso was a testament to both strength and suffering, muscled and powerful, but marked with scars that told stories of violence and survival. I traced one particularly vicious scar that curved around his ribs with gentle fingers, an argument that got out of hand, he said, answering my unspoken question. When I was younger, less careful. I leaned forward and pressed my lips to the scar, a gesture of acceptance and understanding. His sharp intake of breath was the only warning before his control snapped. Suddenly I was in his arms, his mouth on mine, his hands everywhere at once. He undressed me with reverent efficiency. Each newly revealed inch of skin, worshipped with lips and fingers until I was trembling with need. When he finally laid me on the bed and covered my body with his, the sensation of skin against skin was almost too much to bear. "You're sure?" he asked one last time, his voice strained with the effort of holding back. "I'm sure," I whispered, reaching up to trace the severe line of his jaw, now softened by desire. "I choose this. I choose you." With that, he claimed me fully, our bodies joining in a rhythm as old as time itself. It was beautiful and desperate and perfect, a connection that went beyond the physical, into something I couldn't yet name, but recognized in my soul. Afterward, as we lay tangled in his sheets, my head on his chest, and his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my back, I felt a sense of rightness I hadn't expected. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever complications our different worlds might bring, this moment was true. "Stay," he murmured into my hair. Not a command this time, but a request, vulnerable in its simplicity. I propped myself up on one elbow to look at him, this complicated, dangerous man who had somehow broken through all my defenses. "For how long?" His eyes held mine, serious and intent. "For as long as you want. A night. A week." He paused, something almost like uncertainty crossing his features. "Longer." The implication hung in the air between us. This wasn't just about physical attraction or the thrill of the forbidden. Alessandro Moretti was offering me a place in his life, a life I still only partially understood, with dangers I could barely imagine. "What would that look like?" I asked. "Me. In your world?" He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch gentle despite the strength I knew those hands possessed. "It would look like this, private moments of peace amid the chaos. It would mean protection, security. No more struggling to make rent, no more late-night bus rides in dangerous neighborhoods." He paused, his expression softening. "It would also mean finishing your degree if you wanted, working in art restoration, building the life you dreamed of before it was interrupted." The offer was tempting, not just the wealth and security, but the chance to reclaim dreams I'd thought were lost forever. Yet I knew there would be a price. "And what would you expect from me in return?" "Loyalty," he said without hesitation. "Discretion. And this, moments of truth between us when the rest of the world gets only lies and carefully constructed facades." I considered his words, weighing the risks against the rewards, the danger against the undeniable connection we shared. "I can't answer tonight," I said finally. "This is all happening so fast." He nodded, no disappointment or pressure in his expression. "Take the time you need. The offer stands." I settled back against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath my ear. Outside, the lake lapped gently against the shore, a rhythmic counterpoint to our breathing as we drifted toward sleep. In the morning, I woke to find Alessandro already up, standing by the windows watching the sunrise over the lake. He'd pulled on a pair of lounge pants but remained shirtless, the scars on his back silvery in the early light. I took a moment to appreciate the sight of him. Powerful, dangerous, but somehow vulnerable in this unguarded moment. As if sensing my gaze, he turned. "Good morning." "Good morning," I echoed, sitting up and pulling the sheet around me. He crossed to the bed and leaned down to kiss me, a gentle press of lips that held the promise of more. "No regrets?" he asked when he pulled back. I shook my head. "No regrets. Good." He smiled. a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his severe features. "Because I have something to show you." After a quick shower and breakfast, Alessandro led me to a part of the house I hadn't seen before, a small room adjacent to his office. He paused at the door, his expression uncharacteristically hesitant. "What is it?" I asked. "A gesture," he said, opening the door, "to show you I'm serious about my offer." Inside was a fully equipped art restoration studio, work tables, specialized lights, tools, and materials of the highest quality. Everything a conservator could dream of, arranged with meticulous attention to detail. I stepped into the room, speechless, running my fingers over the pristine surfaces. "How did you—" "I have connections at the Art Institute," he said, watching my reaction. I asked what a professional studio would need. He came to stand behind me, his hands light on my shoulders. "It's yours, whenever you're ready." In that moment, surrounded by the tools to reclaim my abandoned dreams, I made my choice. Whatever dangers Alessandro Moretti's world might hold, whatever complications might lie ahead, I wanted to face them with him. I turned in his arms, rising on tiptoes to kiss him. "Yes," I whispered against his lips. His arms tightened around me, his kiss deepening with relief and promise. When we finally broke apart, his amber eyes were warm with something that looked remarkably like happiness. "Welcome home, Emily Carson," he said. And for the first time in years, I truly was.